Hey, it's Chris. I love talking about board games. Do you like talking about board games? We're talking about crowdfunding games this week, and I told you, the last 2 weeks prior to this have been jam-packed, top heavy, like I said. The couple games that are launching this week are really, really spectacular. Like, the crowdfunding comments will make you think that almost everything launched in the last month is a Game of the Year candidate. I'll tell you that right now, all right? But no, seriously, we've got some actually very interesting games today. Unconscious Mind, Fit to Print, Last of Us, some very interesting, changes from what we've seen, raising a significant amount of money, even with the competition it's going up against right now. And so even the next 2 weeks after this are going to be jam-packed as well, very top-heavy. So don't take your eyes off the prize, like what you actually want. In the meantime, though, I'm going to break down everything I know that you need to know about all these games. Let's just go right into it. Let's do this. As always, covering everything in between. Big stuff, small stuff. Stay tuned to the end because there's always a few surprises. So we're going to start out with Unconscious Mind. I mean, we have to, right? Less than 24 hours in, almost $400,000. This is relatively amazing. Fantasia Games is starting to get a little bit of a track record. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but this is their follow-up for Endless Winter, Paleo Americans, which is just delivering now to backers. And, I reached out to them a while back. They sent me Endless Winter, so I'm going to have a little bit of conversation about that in the near future on the channel as well. So what do you need to know about this Freudian, not slip, of a game where you are treating clients, trying to decipher their dreams, trying to interpret their dreams, trying to help them with their dreams while navigating your passions and interests and your influence on them as one of Freud's assistants. Now, this is going to be very interesting because this is a little bit of a heavier game, but I don't think the individual aspects, components, actions are actually that hard. But it's the combination, the amalgam of all of them that's going to be a little bit Feldian, if you will, with a Freudian twist. And what I mean by that is you've got a lot of things going on. You've got a lot of moving interaction and parts that are going to be going across, as you can see, on this sort of multi-board table, including your own little cognition wheel right here. 1 to 2 hours here is going to be the interesting time frame of whether or not it will actually encapsulate that, or if with a game this nuanced, with this many things going on, if it actually is going to be a lot more. If you backed Fantasia Games on Endless Winter, you're going to see already that the price there was significantly less than the secondary market, let alone the retail side of things with their game previously. And I would assume that this campaign pricing is going to hold very true. Now, do you need the collector's box, the art print, and the large playmat with the holofoil dream cards? No, you probably don't. You'd probably be fine right here with the $90. I kind of wish that you could get the expansion minus the soundtrack and the print art pack for maybe closer to 75-ish, but take that for what you will. Like I said, this is a Euro Deluxeified game, which is running you about $90. Is anyone surprised in that price point? No. That's typically what things have been going for lately. And like I said, it goes through all the exclusivity in terms of the little extras and the stretch goals and all of that. This is a combinatorial, mechanistic game. Worker placement, engine building, programming, rondels to develop your therapeutic techniques to help decipher dreams and, establish your clientele. And you're going to have these ideas, these idea tiles, essentially, that you're going to be playing down on action rows. And when you play them on action rows, you can determine how many times you get to do each one of those tiles, depending on the number of tiles you lay, but also depending on the little lightning bolts that are next to the row. Now, then you get to take either the action of treating your clientele or going on to the next phase. Then your two basic actions of what you can do on your turn are going to be split between column A, like the one I just mentioned, or column B, which is going to be like gathering up your actions, your tiles, and getting the bonus from that, and then also treating the clientele. And treating the clientele is going to be via using your insights on your dial here of the 3 different types that you're going to be sort of trying to express, trying to grow along the way. The rondel portion of thing is this ink pot that you'll be moving around that is part of column B, or if you will, if I go back to my analogy earlier, of the things that you will be doing or manipulating, because each of those rows also has an ink pot marker that is going to force you to move an ink pot a certain amount on your rondel to take a certain action or get a certain bonus. So it's not just playing and manipulating the number and the type of the action of the variety there. It's also the secondary after that. And so again, like I said, layer upon layer, you're going to be using these different types of dream cards to treat your different clientele. There's like 2 or 3 different types of dream cards. There's 2 or 3 different types of clientele that you're going to be sort of either drafting or acquiring as you go along throughout the game. Now, the end game is actually interesting because as you're moving your professor and Freud is gradually going to be accumulating Freudian points. Well, I don't know what you want to call them, but essentially when Freud gets to 10, the game ends. And the nice thing about this game is the end game scoring condition actually is not just, hey, Freud gets to the end, boom, game's over, right? It's Freud gets to 10, finish the round, and then get one last round so that you don't have anyone crying at the table, oh, if I just had one more turn to do it. No, none of that. So that's what you're getting there with the reputation. Now, if you download the rules, I'm not going to click on it here for you, but it's a 41-page rule book, which is, frankly speaking, when I pulled it up the first time, it's frankly very intimidating. Now there's a lot of iconography. And so basically from page 27 to 41 is just an explanation of all the iconography and all the different types of like client and dream cards that you're going to run into. So essentially you have, a good third of the rule book, over a third of the rule book, more like 40% almost, of explanation of stuff that's just going to be within the game, iconography, illustration wise, card action wise. And so it's not as intimidating, but I will tell you that it is probably, if not the heaviest, one of the heaviest between this and Ceres of the games that launched this week. It's probably heavier than a good majority of the games that have launched in the last 2 or 3 weeks as well, to give you a comparison point. But like I said, it's text heavy and there's a lot of nuance and a lot of layers to each of those actions. It's not that necessarily the actions themselves are that, complicated. It's that, this has 3 different things you have to remember. This has 3 different things you remember. This has 3 different things you have to remember. And all of those are like one action, right? So that's more of the issue from that aspect. Gameplay, how to play, product analysis, what's in the box, all of that stuff, the art pack, the free association module box, which you're getting. And this is another reason why it's going to be cheaper to get it here, is you're getting this, and you're going to see this Nightmare expansion as well for a lower price. Now, again, I can't speak to the Nightmare expansion. I didn't see a mention of that in the initial rulebook. I'm going to guess we'll get more information as it goes. If you really want to super deluxify with plastic, you can do that there. Dream cards, digital soundtrack, all of the other extras that I mentioned, neoprene mat as well. So neoprene mats are cool, but finding them to be slightly less practical for my own purposes going forward. So here are the sort of stretch goals that they're offering. There's a little bit of gameplay content as well, and it's interesting they've got it split across all the board, right? They've got the deluxifications, they've got core, and they also have expansion. So that's very, very interesting to see how they do that. A little bit of FOMO there, a little bit of FOMO. And then a few add-ons revealed. I kind of like this. I wish Simon would do this so we'd have a little bit better clue from that standpoint. But that is the nutshell of Fantasia Games. This one has me intrigued. This one has try before it buy all over it. But I like the idea of this as something a little bit heavier to dip my toes into, essentially from that aspect of things. Now, next up, we're going to talk about the other game that I will be literally backing after I finish filming this video. This is Fit to Print. This is from Flatout Games. This is $29. This is going to be exactly the same price point, price tiering scheme that they have done previously with Calico, Verdant, and Cascadia. It's the same price. It's the same level of complexity game, if you will, but it's got all the fun and all the nuance of the others. And that's why I say it's a perfect fit, because as I talked about last week in the upcoming video, this is a potential, depending on if you want to or not, they're offering a variant, real-time playing game. And I love real-time playing games, right? Like Millennium Blades and Sorcerer's City and Bullet are 3 games that are absolutely never going to leave my collection because of how awesome they are with the real-time element. And I freaking love it. And so if you give me more of that with a tile laying aspect of things, a la Sorcerer's City, a little bit lighter than Sorcerer's City, I'm all over it, because what you're essentially doing is you're having to make the front page of the news. And so, like I said previously, the gameplay is relatively straightforward, right? There's 3 rounds that you're playing, a total of basically 3 phases each round. The first phase is there's just a bunch of tiles. You go, you grab, you go, you grab, you go, you grab. You grab until you're done. And then when you decide you have enough to fill your page in a respective way, you yell layout. And then everybody has to stop and you have to go and try and fill it. And then when you have it filled, and this is where the tile selection as well as the tile placement comes really, really heavily, you all like print. And so then everybody stops and you like have to score. If you're the first one to yell print, you actually get your choice of center tile, which is going to be like different shapes or different attributes that are going to help you with the scoring, because it's not all going to be equal sized and equal shaped and all that fun stuff. So you're going to be rearranging and rearranging and rearranging, trying to get the least amount of empty space on this tile grid that you have essentially. And whoever can do so the best wins. And now the interesting point on this is you have about 4 or 5 different things that you're going to be scoring or trying to min-max essentially as you go. You're going to be having these newspaper tiles, which are going to have all different attributes on them. Everything from like happy title to sad title to the type of tile that they are, ads versus stories versus, op-eds, whatever it may be, right? But there's going to be certain placement rules, like you can't have 2 next to each other, or this is going to be better next to that, or, that sort of thing with a tile laying game that you're running into. And then finishing tokens, like I mentioned, and here are the sided centerpieces that are going to give you different ways or abilities or scoring options that you have. Breaking news cards are going to be events that are happening each of those 3 rounds, because that whole process I just described, you do it 3 times, right? You do it like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so that's essentially what you've got going on. You've got characters with potentially asymmetric cards that you can do as sort of a variant as well. And they even allow you to time-wise change how much time you want in the real-time scoring in case nobody ever shouts, whatever layout it is, right? You can do like 3, 4, 5 minute times. And they talk about the variant down here. They talk about the variants and the tiles that may not touch and how you're going to minimize and maximize. And they go through everything here. There's plenty of information. The rule book is right here. It's a really easy read. It's straightforward. There's a solo mode on top of that, the puzzle mode in addition. And they even go down here and they give you a little bit more information about the turn-based mode if you're looking from that aspect. But no, if you're buying this, I'm getting the real-time mode. So I love that fact. I don't have any interest in the newsroom mode. 4 to 12 players. I'm never going to have 12 people. I'm never going to have 6 or 8. So I can easily pass on that. But I will be backing this as this. And holy crap, this is a lot of videos. Oh, this is all the other stuff too. Yeah, so there you go. Tons and tons and tons of videos. Tons and tons. You just keep scrolling here. This is the longest page I've ever seen with the most videos ever. And a lot of these are actually them. Now, they've got a few stretch goals here. Again, just like with the previous campaigns, they're relatively benign. So you're not getting it because it's the stretch goals in this game. You're getting it because you're not going to pick it up probably for around this price on the secondary market. Or if you do, you're going to be one of those very lucky people. That is Flatout Games, and that is fit to print. And that's why I'm excited about it. So check that one out if you want to. Next up, we have The Last of Us Escape the Dark. Now, this is The Last of Us video game into the Escape the Dark sort of world genre type of game that they've put out previously with like Escape the Dark Castle and Escape the Dark Sector. And this is taking that sort of RPG-esque character survival, turn-based play, take your action, move location, take action system, and utilizing this IP from the video game side of things that you may be more familiar with if you're one of those video game players. And this is, again, relatively impressive. We're under 24 hours and it's got more than a conscious mind, which if you had asked me, I probably would have said not anywhere close to this. But again, I think this is going to be one of those video game cross ports that gets a lot more funding and introduces a lot more people to this style of game. Now, you have several different locations that you're going to be playing through here, and you're going to have several different aspects of your character that you're managing. And it's a little bit of dice driven, but it's a little bit of action economy as well, because the basic turn setup is relatively straightforward, right? You move and take actions, or you take actions at a place you're at. There's a little bit of deluxification, and there are a little bit of miniatures that they're slowly unrevealing with this. You can see here that are a couple, and then they've got a couple to be revealed there. But the basic gist of it is, like it says down here, if we can actually get there, you create this random map with different chapter cards, camp cards, and stashed item cards that you'll be slowly discovering. And even the locations on them themselves will have different actions that will become available to you when you explore the location. But if you explore the location, you may run into threats. Spreading tokens of threat are gradually going to be expanding depending on where you're going and what routes you're trying to go down. You're having characters with different strengths and abilities, and those are going to be sort of your ability checks that you're going to be doing in some of these other events. There's also combat, which is very unique. Combat situation, if we can pull it up down here in a second, kind of gives you a little bit of the dice aspect that I was talking about, right? This is the first thing, though, that you're doing is you're either traveling or you're taking an action. And so they run you through, okay, here's an example. You take the action at this place. You take the traveling on day 2, and then you flip it over, unlocks the action. The action's available to them the remainder of the game. Then as the next action for their day, you get to explore. So you turn to the chapter card from this location, and it kind of gives you an event that happens. If you complete it, you get a reward, and then it's going to potentially reveal things along the way, number of days that go along, and then as you go along further, obviously that's going to be more and more threat that's going to be getting closer and closer to you. The combat situation here, these enemies are going to have dice, and the dice you see down here in the lower left hand corner is to represent how many dice that they're going to be rolling. And why that matters is because you roll those dice, and whatever symbols they are, you have to potentially match up using items or dice of your own in order to match them. And if you can match them all up, then you defeat the enemy. And you're going to have cards like the Shiv here, where instead of, doing a sneak attack, you can just discard this card as a whole, and it allows you to just take care of 3 of these potential, in this case, 6 dice. So that's what you're going to be doing. You're going to have melee, you're going to have ranged weapons, you're going to have the ability to clear those. And that's basically the gist. Now, it's a little bit of RPG, so you have crafting and you have upgrading and things along the way, along that side of things. But that's about it. Now, I will say I'm a little bit displeased that there's no rulebook. I'll criticize. I don't care how much funding you have or what company you are. I don't care about videos. Give me a rulebook for something like this, because some of the nuance and the actions and the selections are a little bit lost without a little bit more guidance, even though it is a relatively decent rundown on the page. I also like the fact that they went with a true funding goal of $120,000. I mean, they didn't shy away from this. They said, this is an IP. We got to have a little extra money. This is not a $5,000 project. We need it. And here you go. So that's The Last of Us Escape the Dark. Give this one a look-see, because I think this series has been relatively well thought of, but the RPG-esque thing and the combination of the Dead of Winter style just doesn't always do it for me. And Last of Us, I have no affiliation with, because I'm not one of those video game people. So if you are, though, give it a heavy look, because from a cooperative game standpoint, it looks very solid. I just wonder, is it going to be as solid a la 7th Continent at the 3 or 4 player count, or even Fall of Avalon, compared to the 1 to 2 player count? So I would say it probably leans, at least personally speaking, from what I can tell on the page, at the lower player count. Next up, we have Henchmania. And this is apparently super popular. They said they've sold 40,000 copies of this game. I'd never really heard of it before I did the upcoming game. This is a 2nd edition, which is almost 40% funded at this point. And the essential addition of what you're doing in Henchmania is you have 8 henchmen that you're going to be placing down in one of 5 different areas on the map. And as you place them down into the areas of the map, you get a color of card that matches the area you laid them down. So predictably, you're going to end up with 8 cards. Wait, you're not, though, because if you control the area majority in that section, you get an additional card. Then the second phase of things goes where you play these cards one by one, and there's going to be instant cards, there's going to be upgrade cards, there's going to be reserve cards, there's going to be a little bit of everything that allows you to gather points up for the end of the game. Now, they're also offering an expansion here and another expansion, as well as an upgrade kit if you have the 1st edition, because it's apparently been not been sold at retail and not been available widely otherwise. So sorry, 20,000 copies sold in stores. So that's really impressive. I don't care who you are or what type of game or what size. 20,000 games is 20,000 games, right? It's a little bit more expensive than I would have guessed for this style of game. 54 euros is not as inexpensive as I would have thought. We'll see, though. I mean, it's on a good track. $15,000 is still $15,000 with the competition you're going up against this month. If you had told me that they had gotten $15,000 in the first day with this, I also would have probably guessed and said, no, I don't believe you. But they've got a few stretch goals and a few, social goals here. They run through how to play. And this is the other thing you can do in this game, is you can duel other people. Essentially, you play a card, they play a card, and your attack card is going to have a value on it. And you roll 3 dice, and you have to get the sum total of that. And if you do, you have to get the total of that, depending on what it is. And I don't think it's a sum total, but like an individual total. So maybe it's like a 4, right? So if you roll 2 4s, then the other person has to take the dice and roll defensive values equal to their defensive card, and only using those 2 dice that were successes for you. And if they do it, great, they succeed in blocking you. If they can't, then you get an advantage. You get I forget what it is, but the rule book says additional bonus points for what you will. So again, a bunch of videos here, what the shipping is going to be and everything else. I mean, it's different. It's definitely different. I haven't seen anything like this out there recently or at all. So I can see why people like it. It's probably not for me, but if this sounds a little bit lighter and a little bit breezy with a little bit of strategy as well, give this one a look-see. Next up, we're talking Helionox Chronicles, a wonderful player deck building game with much more of a Euro element than you may be familiar with. And now this is based on the previous deck builder, Helionox, but this is more of a campaign version where you're almost going up against an AI system that they've designed for you to go up against. And it has basically an episodic structure that you're going to be going through in 6 different episodes as you're gradually, slowly unlocking things, traveling the solar system, moving your ship around, clearing events via dice-driven action. And now that's going to sound interesting. It's going to sound slightly strange. I have a prototype here, but the rules need a little bit of tweaking. And so the designer and I have been in contact. And so I may have something out by the end of the campaign, just depending on how things go. But this is what you've got going on, right? You have these faction cards that are going to be obtainable at the beginning of the game. You're going to be an asymmetric sort of situation with an asymmetric power, asymmetric deck, and you're going to be taking 2 actions per turn on your action board here. And you can see that there are 6 potential slots, but also even a couple spots at the bottom where you're going to be storing resources that you'll be using as well. And what that matters is because you're going to be rolling dice, and the dice are going to affect what you can do at the action spot individually, as well as you're going to be moving around these places in the solar system, these areas that are going to be slowly getting more available to you as well as you progress from scenario to scenario. Each of these areas is also going to have an event that you're trying to clear, and if you do not clear, then the AI system is going to be benefiting from that. You're going to be building buildings at each of these locations that are utilizable, as well as, resource management when it comes to that. Part of your action system from the cards in your hand is going to be freezing or cryo, essentially, and you're going to be slowly thawing 1 per turn as well. So it's to sort of balance it out, right? I can spend as many as I want of these cards, but I'm only going to be able to unthaw potentially that resource, if you will, 1 per turn if I don't have another additional way to speed it up. So timing wise, it becomes very much more important. And that's why I think this is much more of a Euro style deck builder, if that makes sense to you in your head of what I'm saying. And so you can get a better sense of what it looks like from that aspect. Now, again, $49, including promo packs. And I believe it's a 6 scenario campaign-ish driven game. And like I mentioned in the upcoming video last week, it is different, and it does not necessarily port over, or it's compatible with the previous games. And so that's probably the biggest thing you need to know if you're one of those people who was a previous supporter. And it just unlocks slowly as you go across, and you're going to see a little bit of everything going that you may be familiar with from the previous games. The location cards, the command centers, the ships that you're going to be moving around, the dice that are going to be utilized, and the asymmetric decks and faction cards that you're going to be slowly acquiring there. The aesthetic is beautiful. Space games are all the rage this year. We have seen tons and tons of space games. It kind of gives you a little bit of the synopsis that I mentioned here, presence being the AI system that you're going up against, and the threshold resolution is going to be something that when bad things happen, it slowly builds up, and when it builds up and builds up and builds up, then it triggers. So like I said, here's the thawing from your architect, readying your actions and your exhaustion, and then using those dice to play it under those action spaces. And then you have no limitation to the amount of cards you can play, but what ones you're utilizing and how you're utilizing them is going to be different depending on what actions you're taking to go along with that. That's it. The rule book is there, and it's pretty much everything you need to see already on the page. $49. $69 if you want a little bit of an exclusive with a little bit larger size tarot cards and some acrylics. So, and some art prints. End of 2023. I didn't talk about that on any of their other crowdfunding projects because it doesn't really matter too much at this point. If you're like me, you don't really care when you get it. It's just that, click it, back it, and forget it. So, right? That's what I do. Is that not what everybody does? Anyway, that's Helionox Chronicles. Check it out. Now, thrown in the middle here, all of a sudden at the end of the week, we have the launch of On the Underground Paris in New York, which is freaking amazing. If you're not familiar with On the Underground, if you like the idea of Ticket to Ride, but never got the appeal, never thought it was as, complex as you wanted it to be, this is your game. This is an amazing game, and now you have 2 different maps and a standalone expansion for it, which is a little bit more complex than the original, with Paris offering more secret objectives and New York offering bridges and tunnels and water sort of things that you're going to be dealing with as well. The basic concept is just Ticket to Ride, right? You're taking 4 actions, connecting these lines, going across the way, but as you play, you have 4 destination cards that are up every round, and so you have this passenger passenger on the board. It's basically the AI system, and they're going to go from where they're at to the nearest location, and they're going to take whatever route is the shortest. And if your pieces are along that route, you get points, and it just is a rinse and repeat as you build networks until all of the cards, all of the routes in the deck have played. And there are both long routes and short routes that are going to come up, so it's going to be variable on a turn by turn, game by game basis. And the game is freaking amazing. There's a reason why it has the Dice Tower seal of excellence above here as the original, and this is the reprint from like the original being actually in like 2009, I mean, to the original being like in 2009. And it was out of print for a while. And so when they came around, Ludicreations, with this, everybody loved it. And frequently, it's an amazing game. It's an amazing game that does not get talked about enough. And the only question is, with this deluxeified version, whether or not you need it. And to be frank, I'm a little bit not super enthralled by the deluxeified edition. You're getting like a extra solo expansion, but otherwise I don't really see a huge reason to get it now, unless you missed it the first time around as well and you want the deluxeified version, because you're getting like a sleeve and you're getting a little bit of an upgraded components that they run down here. You can see, okay, wooden passenger token versus deluxe transparent passenger token. Printed UV slip coat, and destination tokens are in wood. Destination tokens are these little Paris Eiffel Towers, and then you get the little expansion there. That's it. Now, that's it. Dice Tower knew it was coming out, but no one else did. This came out of the blue. So this is the other pick of the week. If you're really looking for something amazing that I know will succeed, it's just, should you get the original, which is going to be just great, or are these things going to maybe make it too complex? That's my only fear with this. That's my only fear whatsoever. Solo mode as well. Try it. Check out the first one. I highly recommend the first one, if nothing else. So absolutely fantastic game. Cannot say enough. It's just whether or not this one is going to be too much or too little or anything in between. Deluxeified is going to be $59. Now, I will say that they're not shipping to the EU, which people were a little confused by, because I think it's a company out of Finland, which is kind of strange. It's probably something to deal with VAT, and they don't want to deal with it and whatever else. I didn't read too much into that, but you just need to know. So I'm sorry. I have no control over that. Don't take it out on me. The other weird thing is that it's going to be delivering at the end of 2023. Like, that's a long ways off for this game, I would assume. So take that for what it is, but freaking amazing game if you can get your hands on a copy of it. Next up, we're going to talk about Wayfarer's Tale, which, again, I told you that this was going to be the sleeper hit of the week as well. A roll and write, which has got almost $5,000 for £5. The only problem I have is there's no rulebook on the page. It gives me serious vibes of combination of Postmark Games' Voyages and AEG's Guild of Merchant Explorers, a combination thereof, because what you're doing is you're rolling dice and you're taking a combination of two of those dice and you're going across a hex-based situation grid, exploring towns, fighting enemies, upgrading your characters, and when somebody has explored all the towns and the game ends and the person who has the most victory points wins. That's all I know, though. You're going to be upgrading or unlocking certain explorers because you have to have certain explorers to go over each type of hex tile, so you can only go like certain paths, and you're going to like have to be very selective on how that goes. I haven't watched any of the videos to know any more of the actual like mechanic, but the one written review that I looked at down here doesn't give much more of an rules overview than that. Talks about the fact you're going to need 5 standard dice, 3 of the same, and then 1 of extra for a treasure die and 1 extra for another active die. That's it. They're going to have super, super high stretch goals. So take that for what it is, but it's £5 that you can play virtually or in person and laminate it like you do if you're me, because that's what I did with Aquamarine and Voyages from Postmark Games. That's what I'm doing with Sunshine City as well, that I backed in earlier in the year. So if you're interested in any of those games that I just mentioned right there, this is something that you need to check out and probably watch a video, because the page doesn't give enough illustration. The written review didn't give enough illustration. And I just wish they had an actual rule book up there. I mean, you don't need to like spoil things for me, but give me something actually a little bit more concrete there. Otherwise, though, it's killing it. Almost $5,000. It's going to be well over $5,000 probably by the time you guys view this. So Wayfarer's Tale, check it out. Now I take this back. Another complex game that we're seeing this week as well is Copan Dying City here from Holy Grail Games. It's using the Mayan civilization, and it's actually talking about the decline of the Mayan civilization in a worker placement style game for potentially 2-3 hour plus games. And what you're going to be doing here is you're going to be laying down your workers, collecting resources, and sort of slowly chipping away at the resources that are available to you as the game goes on, because it's a dying civilization, and they take that into account as you use up certain locations, and there's like 5 different locations you're going to be utilizing, and as they get more utilized, the resource production at those places, the actions that are going to be there are sort of lessened, and they become much more scarce in terms of what they're producing or the resources that are available. And you're going to be trying to take your family to the top while things are still declining. And it's about a 40-page rule book, which has, again, a significant amount of iconography down at the end, but it's still one of the larger, denser rule books this week, so you really need to give it a look-see. But the basic concept is relatively straightforward of you're placing your workers, you're moving them, and then you're having the decline of the resources potentially, and then you're collecting those resources to rinse and repeat to gather points to be able to do the things that you need to do on a turn-by-turn basis as you go along. Now you're going to be placing them in one of potentially 4 different court tiles, and they're going to have different resources that you're going to be gathering from each one of those, as it says here. And you're generating the resources. It runs through the different areas that you're going to be playing in, the City of Decline that I already mentioned. And then, the game ends when court tile spaces have been completely used up or resources have been exhausted in 2 of the different 4 resources. You can play it online with Tabletopia, and it's going to cost you anywhere from $60 to $95 if you want the expansion and the super deluxeifications, which, again, seems to be the relatively consistent price point for games in terms of deluxe euros or deluxe worker placements nowadays. Somewhere between 80 to 100 euros. So it's right in what I would expect. And if you just want the expansion, and I think people were saying that this is actually because if they're going to localize it later, if you want to get it in your own language, you can still get some of the other stuff that is going to be a little harder to get. So that's what they kind of go through there. Add-ons, and the expansion is going to be adding quest style play from a narrative book, which is very interesting. Wasn't expecting that. There you go. That's everything you need to know that I can tell you about as a not heavier worker placement person. So check it out. And that is Copan Dying City. There you go. Next up, Gatefall, the reprint new standard edition. Now, if you're familiar with Gatefall, this is a 2-player skirmish edition from Jack Dyer, who has received relatively well-funded previous editions of this game. I think they've put out the base game, as well as I think 2 or 3 different expansions to go along with it, including one within the last year or so that offered a different mechanism to go along with it, like little allies, essentially, animal allies or something along those lines. Now, this is slightly different because they have minimized it, or minimalistic approach, in the sense that it's previously like relatively good sized miniatures, and so it was more like Cthulhu Wars, not like that big, but the miniatures were oversized and they were nice and the production was good, and I think it was like $50, and so it's very well affordable from that. But now if you even wanted to get it at less standpoint, it's $29 for a miniature less version, standee version. I don't know why I said it that way. And so that's what you can get there. Smaller box size, less overhead, less price. That's cool. It talks about a couple of the other expansions. The basic gist of this game and what sets this skirmish game apart is you've got your asymmetric characters. You're moving them each with a different speeds and asymmetric abilities, but then you're going to be rolling dice to see who attacks and who hits. But the actions that you have are going to be available to you by the cards you draw from your deck that are going to be upgradable, which are going to have anywhere from 0 to potentially, like you see on there, 3 actions per card that you are playing on a turn-by-turn basis. You can upgrade your fighter to make them a little bit more asymmetric, drawing items, and then clash back and forth. And depending on how you score, how many you knock out, objectives that are achieved, you're going to be scoring points to get 7 victory points before your opponent. That's it. They run through a little bit of the previous stuff as well down here, the deluxeifications. Here it is. Yeah, Monsters is coming in January. And then this was the more recent one, the Boglings. And then you had the, Zombies, Bounty Hunters, Wild West, Kung Fu. Oh, this is all early concepts. So where's the previous one? Here we go. Expansion and the huge minis. And they really are huge minis. So take that for what you will. But that's it. That's Gatefall. That's a quick roll review of this skirmish style game. Check it out. Next up, what do we got on the board here? Super Dark. We have Super Dark, which is sort of a combination of Murder in Hong Kong and Secret Hitler, but this time you're doing it with political campaigns and contributions. You have a super PAC and just like regular citizens, right? And you're trying to influence the candidates with money, but you're trying to not allow them to be corrupted, because if they get a certain amount of their money that takes to get them elected as dark money, then they become corrupted. And if more become corrupted than not, then the super PAC wins. If more of them have regularly elected funds, then the citizens win, right? Like that's how it works in real life too. And it's just a social deductive game for 4 to 8 players. It's sort of like Werewolf with a different theme mixed with Secret Hitler, if that makes more sense. The tricky part is at any point you can reveal yourself as a super PAC, and what you're going to be doing is you're going to be laying down these cards one per turn to each of these various people you're trying to elect. And whenever they reach the threshold of their total money needed to be elected, then you count it and see how much was of each. Now the tricky part is if you're the super PAC, normally in this game you're trying not to reveal yourself, but the super PAC can add these extra cards on top per round to drastically influence things much quicker, especially in tight situations. So that's what is going to be slightly different in that aspect. $40 is the early bird, $49 is the regular price point. And that's basically the game in a nutshell. You just go until everybody gets elected and you see who has more of which one. It's relatively straightforward. It's a social deduction type game of a slightly different theme and a slightly different manner of mechanism. So it's definitely going to be appealing. It's probably a little bit better at some of the lower player counts than a few of the other games that are similar to this by the nature of only having the 2 teams and relatively straightforward gameplay. But again, is it going to appeal to you? Because it's still, like I mentioned, social deduction. So there's Super Dark. Check it out. Next up, we have Ceres, which is the other heavy game launch this week. A combination of 1 to 4 players, engine building in space with worker placement, right? Like, tell me if you've heard that a couple times in the last couple of months, right? Like worker placement in space, it just seems like a little bit of a deja vu from that aspect. We're going to see what Artipia has here. They're almost about 175% funded. And 1 to 4 players, 30 minutes per player. And you're going to be essentially a head or leader of an asteroid mining corporation. And you're going to be trying to outdo other asteroid mining corporations. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be having these asteroids travel around this little belt here at different speeds that you're going to be able then to utilize production of on a turn-by-turn basis over a series of 3 large, all-encompassing rounds. And so what you're going to be doing is you're going to be trying to score victory points based on how well you can build things up along the way. And if we pull up the rulebook here, because again, this one again is going to be a little bit of the denser rulebooks, you're going to be completing research programs, undertaking settlement projects, as well as wielding influence over the assembly of corporations that's in the game. Victory points are going to be done by constructing facilities, launching probes, and developing said projects in the first place and the influence. So there's a lot of things going on, as you can see with this game board setup here. And the relative turns or rounds are separated into 3 phases. One is the sort of the asteroid phase, where when I mentioned the asteroid be moving around at different speeds in the different rings, well, that's what's going to be happening. And then you're going to be getting production based on the outstations that you have available to you to be able to be harvested, essentially. And then you take your worker placement actions, where you're either taking your workers or your pawns or potentially your leader and going to certain actions to get all of those things that I just mentioned in terms of the utilization of those actions. And then the round ends when everybody has passed. So it's not necessarily going to be one of those games where everybody gets equal turns. It just depends on what you can do and how much you can do each round. And then they run through all of the action locations at the construction yard and the trade area and the council, so you get a full description of what's going on there. I mean, this is a 23-page rulebook that is relatively dense as well. There's an exclusive mission pack as well as an expansion here in the early 72 hours. So if you're viewing this video early, you may have a chance at still getting in that aspect. But this is definitely going to be probably the second heaviest game behind Unconscious Mind. But I would argue that the mechanisms might be slightly more complex here. So from that aspect, it might be actually slightly more complex as well. It's a little bit outside my depth. I can't give you as good of detail, but it runs you relatively through here on the page. The value wise, it's going to be $60, which is actually a little bit less than I expected, especially given some of these wooden upgrades. So yeah, not too bad. A few add-ons there as well. A 3D printed cargo spacecraft. Okay, sure. What's loyalty reward here? Oh, if you get any of their last 3 campaigns previously, you get a $5 off coupon on this one. I think they're still delivering in the process of the Art of Happiness, the big box. So there's some work on that from that side of things. But that's Ceres from Artipia. Check it out. Next up, we have Legends of StormCity. Now, I'm talking about this one even though it's got $500 because one, I knew it was launching and I did it on the upcoming video last week. And two, when you scroll down here, even though they've only got $500 raised, they talk about them being a roll and write for 1 to 4 players where you're print and playing essentially with a few additional components that are needed. You just need some D6s. So that's not a big deal. What's really interesting about this is if you scroll down right here, the Board Game Geek roll and write competition, best overall game, best solitaire game, best multiplayer game, right? Like, there's not probably a ton of those games on Board Game Geek. It's probably not like it's like 300 or 400, but still, I mean, that's not insignificant either. That means when you're looking at this, that's something that's been played and that's something that people actually really like already. It's not just a random collection of rules and dynamics and whatever else, right? So that gives me a little bit better pedigree when you've got some of that out there. Basically what you're doing is you're rolling dice on the villain's turn, activating their abilities, putting their plans into motion, and then taking the hero's turns by rolling their dice and trying to counteract those plans, trying to use your abilities and try to attack the villains and their henchmen until they're knocked out and captured. So there's not a whole lot of more information, unfortunately. I think I maybe missed the rulebook on here, but I don't see it. The pledge levels are $6 or $9. Or if you want everything, there's an $11 one too. But only the higher pledges, $16 even, $30 if you want to be a character. But the lowest pledge level, the $6 one, does not have the stretch goals. So just be aware of that. Even though they've only hit one right now, I would imagine they're going to hit a couple others. Who knows? Maybe my video will boost it into the quadruple digits here. And so maybe you can get a couple extra heroes and villains and advanced game modes. But yeah, I would say check it out over on Board Game Geek, because if it did go up in that competition, you'll see some more thoughts as well. I just wish I saw a rule book, and I don't know why I don't, but I would assume that's maybe an oversight more than anything else, because it's a roll and write. I can't imagine it's going to be too long of a rule book either, but take that for what it is. There you go. We have Legends of StormCity. Now we have No Such Thing as a Free Sandwich. This is basically apples to apples with a sandwich theme, with a slight variation, because what you're doing is you're not just playing one card, you're playing several cards of an ingredient of a sandwich, trying to meet the objective that is presented at the beginning of the round. And you're going to have cards that are going to be affecting not only your own sandwich, but other people's sandwich with a little bit of take that. And so that's what you're trying to do. The one who does it the best wins the game, and you collect the most challenges, you win. The one who does it the best collects the card, collect the most challenge cards, you win the game. That's it. It's small mint tin sized version of things, and they run through a couple of the challenges here on the board, and it's only going to cost you $20. So it's got almost $900, which again doesn't sound like a whole lot, but for a little tin game like this, it's $20 each. That's really impressive. So they're going for $4,000. We'll see if they hit it. There you go. That's it. That's the roundup this week. Short, sweet. Very top heavy, but a few interesting topics and games as well from that side of things. So I just love talking about board games. So if you're interested, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Let me know what you're backing right now. I haven't done one of those videos of like where things have been at for like the last 2 months. So I might have to sit down and do one of those of things I backed, didn't back, and why recently. Because it's been, like I said, it's been too long. It's been too long. I'm trying to work on this overhead camera thing too. My Role Player Adventures review should be out by now, but it's not, because I'm deciding whether or not to scrap the overhead footage and refilm it all or not, because that would be a mighty, mighty big endeavor. But that's all I got otherwise. I'm working all weekend, so hopefully you guys are having a better weekend than I am. It's going to be like warm for a couple days, and then it's like freezing the rest of the week here. So, I guess middle of November, right? Who'd have thought? It's freezing, right? I live in Michigan, so, anything over like 30 this time of year is good in my mind. So that's all I got. And ramble over a couple rants I filmed earlier in the week. I haven't really been feeling like filming a whole lot lately this past week. That's why there's a couple less videos out, but a couple rants, and we're going to see where those go, because a couple of them are going to be interesting, and a couple of them some people might not like, but you know how it is. That's why I'm only where I'm at. Stay classy. See you around. Peace out.